everyone, this is Matt Perez, and today I want to kick off a small video series dealing with Mastercam X7 standalone and really just how to navigate, get around, and what some of the tools are that's at your disposal. These couple videos are going to be aimed at the person that is just starting using Mastercam X7. If you have machining experience, but you're just now getting into the actual NC side of things and working with 3D models and creating your programs in here, this is what you're going to be looking for to help you get around in the program. If you are just starting and you open this up and you just see all these different icons around, it's a little overwhelming. It's hard to take in if you don't have that experience and you haven't grown with the program a little bit. Now, if you started back in, one of the earlier versions, X3, X4, X5, and you're maybe just now making the jump to X7, most of it is going to be the same. You're not really dealing with too many jumps in terms of the user interface here. But there might still be some helpful information for you, and hopefully we'll go over a few tips that will help you increase your productivity as you learn the program a little bit better. So in this first video, we're going to talk about the operation manager. That's really the heart and the soul of this program where you're going to spend most of your time working. And I just want to go over a few details in it and show you how to navigate what some of the buttons are going to do for you and so on. So to get started, your operation manager is automatically located on the left-hand side. Now you can drag this and you can make it smaller. You can even close it or open it and toggle that view if you need to. So there's a few ways to do that. If we hold down the Alt key and hit the O on our keyboard, that's going to toggle the operations manager off and on. You can also go up to the view and you can see that we can toggle the operations manager. There's also a multi-threading manager, which when you're doing toolpaths that require a lot of calculation to create those toolpaths, you'll notice that next to it there's a little, basically it looks like a thread bobbin icon, and that means that it's actually multi-threading. It's using more processors on your computer in order to create that faster. And that's something that's happened in the last couple versions, where if you're used to an older version, maybe X2, X3, X4, you wouldn't have had that option back then. So now that we know where the operation manager is and how we can toggle it on and off, let's talk a little bit about what it is. There are a couple tabs at the top, and based on the packages you have and what you have turned on, you might see a tab over here that says Art on it. Now, we're not going to be dealing with that today, but we're going to focus on the toolpaths and the Solid tab. First, if we go to the Solid tab, you'll notice that you can expand this and you'll get a list of all the solid bodies within your file. Now, if these were created within Mastercam with the solids package, if you drew the sketches, did the extrudes, and did all the modeling within here, then you would actually get a list of all the different features that were used to create that body. And it would basically allow you to expand farther down until you get to all the information that you can see. For us, this model was actually imported from SolidWorks, so we only get what's considered a dumb solid. It's basically a solid body, all the geometry is there, but we don't have any parametric tree or a history that lets us know how it was created. So the benefit of doing this type of modeling within Mastercam would mean that you could have easy updates to the parts. Now, I'm typically used to working in Mastercam for SolidWorks because I do all my modeling in SolidWorks. It makes more sense for me to use that add-in package, but there are some benefits to using the standalone X7, and it really depends on what you guys are machining. In the Operations Manager on the Toolpaths tab, this is where most of the information is going to be. We're going to talk a little bit about what all these buttons are and how you can actually navigate and change things in here. So the first row of buttons basically are going to be most of the operations type functionality that you're going to need. The first couple are going to allow you to select all the operations or select the dirty operations. You can regenerate all of them or just dirty operations. Now, a dirty operation is going to be one that basically has been calculated already, but maybe you've made a change to the model, maybe the geometry has changed, or something's changed. Maybe you've changed the tool that you're using and it needs to recalculate that information. If we expand this, I'll go ahead and show you an example. This first one is using a 4-inch face mill. If for some reason I came back here and I modified the diameter of that tool, you can see now there's an X next to the toolpath. It's marked dirty. So I can regenerate that based on the new tool. It needs to use that tool geometry in order to figure out where the tool is actually going to go and pass by. So anytime you make a change, even if it's as simple as changing the tool, could be the same tool, maybe a different tool number, it's going to have to recalculate that. The next areas are going to be your backplot and your verify. Now these are going to be the handy tools that you can use to see where the toolpaths are going. So if we use the verify, it's going to open a separate Mastercam simulator window. If we use the backplot, it's going to be done within this modeling window here. So if we show that, we have some options here. We can do things like toggle the tool on and off, toggle the holder on and off, and we can change how we're displaying the toolpath. So if we want to display the endpoint, if we want to do a quick verify, and then we can simply play it. Now you have options to change the run speed here. You can also do a trace mode where all your toolpaths are already laid out for you and the tool is just tracing it. So let's go ahead and just have this go by, and you can see how it's actually tracing that. If we change it to actually show the toolpath, it's only showing the toolpath as it's cutting or as it's passing by. Now obviously this is a very handy tool, especially when you want to see where your tool geometry, the holder and the actual tool itself, is going in relation to the model, to the geometry. If you need a little bit more information, you can open the verify, and this is going to open the Mastercam simulator, and in this case it's actually going to be removing material from your stock. You'll get a different color every time a toolpath is run. So for instance, the first facing operation changed the model from red to yellow where it cut. The second operation is changing it from yellow or red to blue, and then the third operation is maroon, and then green, and then pink and orange, and so on. So every time you have a different toolpath in your operations manager, you're going to get a different color on the model here. And it's a real good way to see which operations are cutting where quickly, and then also which operations maybe have an error, so you can go back and you can figure out where that is. And if you wanted to verify just one operation, all you do is make sure you select that one, you get the green check mark next to it, and then we can verify just that single operation. Now, you can obviously understand that a lot of times you're going to have issues where you might have a tool intersection with the model geometry or so on. But within your verify, you can show the toolpath if you need to, show the workpiece. The gray area in here is the original workpiece. You can show the stock or hide the stock or ghost it in this case. So if you wanted to show the workpiece on the inside, making that stock transparent kind of helps you out and see where the tool is actually going. And there's a lot of different options within here that are very handy for you. The next segment is really just options. The backplot and verify options are somewhat limited. There's not many things that you can change within this options, but it's really talking about the stock and a little bit of cutter compensation. The next area is going to be how you're going to post your code. If we want to post just this single operation, we hit the G1 and we can output that NC file. Now this is all going to be based on whatever mill you've already selected in here. Then there are a few more options for high feed and then delete, and then this gets you to the help. Now if you click high feed, there's just some optimizations here. It shows you some information about the toolpath that you have selected. Now we've only got the one selected in this case, so it's only displaying one. If we go back and select all the operations, you'll see that we're getting a little bit different view here. We have a 1/4 inch bit, we have a 1/2 inch bit, and then we have that 3 inch, which I modified that face mill. So you see information about the feed rate that it's going. None of these feed rates have been changed, the depth of cut, and plunge rate, and so on. So this is a good indication of what's going on and what's happening. And then you can show roughing and finishing, or finishing only. So those are the tools up top that are really the functionality kind of tools: the selection process, the verify process, posting your code, kind of getting an idea of how fast your tool's moving, material, the plunge, how deep of a cut, and so on. So the next row is really going to be dealing with display and insertion of operations. So if we want to toggle on and off the display of all the toolpaths, we can do that within here. We can lock selected operations if we wanted to show one and not have it toggle all the time. If we wanted to toggle the posting on select operations, we could do that. So these three options here are really going to be how you're going to determine what operations get locked, what are viewed, and what will actually go to post. The up and down arrows change the insertion point for a toolpath. So for instance, if we wanted to right click and add a mill toolpath in here, we can add any of these toolpaths. We have quick access just by right clicking, and they'll be inserted wherever that red arrow is. We can position the insert arrow after a selected operation or a selected group. So for instance, if we select one, we can simply pop it after that operation. And this really helps if you're dealing with dozens and dozens of operations within here. And then there's options to scroll the window so it inserts where it's visible. Now, I don't have enough operations to actually push me past this window, but if you did, then this would come in very handy. And the last couple are going to only display selected toolpaths. You can only display associative geometry, and then this last little button is just a tool setup, which only comes up on certain operations at certain times. So that is a quick overview of the Operations Manager, and there's a few more things that we need to cover before we move on. The difference between machine groups and toolpath groups we've covered in other videos dealing with Mastercam for SolidWorks and some of the basics there which correlate between the two programs, but just a quick overview of the difference between these two. The machine group, this is going to be based on the machine you're running. So for instance, if you're running a 3-axis mill and you have a part that you maybe need to flip twice or flip 3 times, you're going to use a single machine group for that one mill. Now this mill is selected before you ever start programming, or it's going to come in as the default. And then every time you do a flip, you might want to use a different toolpath group. Now, let's say for instance this part needed to go to wire EDM first, or a mill turn station, and then we needed to take it to a mill. In that case, you would create multiple machine groups. So you would right click and you would insert a new machine group. Now the machine group would be based on the type of operations you're doing. If you're doing a different mill, if you're doing a lathe, a router, a wire, mill turn, so on. So that's a little way to differentiate the operations you're doing. So you can do multiple flips of the same part within the machine group, or you could do machining operations on a lathe and keep the same program file, the same Mastercam file, and then also create a new machine group for your mill. So it's a real handy way for you to organize and really get that functionality in there. Within each machine group, you're going to have your properties section, and that's dealing with the file, tool settings, and stock setup. And this is where you can make your bounding box, which is this dashed red section here. And that's the red stock that gets machined away when we're doing our verify in the Mastercam simulator. You can also change the stock view, you can change the type of stock, or you can actually open a file if you've created a stock from an STL file or so on. So for instance, if you're dealing with a part that maybe has a rough casting to start with, or maybe you've created a stock model based on the lathe operation before it ever gets to the mill, that's where you would put this information in here. You would create that stock model at the end of the tooling that you did in the other files. And then the tool settings, you can come in here and change some of the automatic settings. Most of the time I leave it as from tool, but you can also change the type of material and you can make the calculations based on that, some default values or user defined values. So you can see you can define the material in here as well, and a lot of these tools can be very handy, especially if you're dealing with a lot of standard stuff. The file section, this is something that you should probably go review the other videos that I've talked about this on, where you're talking about the machine group, the control definition files, where your tool libraries and operations and all that information is, because this is really its own subject all by itself, but this information can all be modified, manually modified here. And it's all based on whatever mill you're using. So if you have a generic mill such as this default, or if you're dealing with some sort of specific mill information, that's where you're going to create that information, where you're going to modify it. So that's the basic overview of the Operations Manager, the type of information that's in there, and some of the tools that you can get to and some of the ways that you can organize this part. So in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about customizing your environment, now that we've talked about the Operations Manager and how to get around that. But if you guys have any questions, please email mastercamsupport@mlc-cad.com, and we'll see you next time.